Hello, everyone, and yes, welcome to the DYA Developing Young Athletes Network that we call Network Nation. Again, I'm your host, David Edwards. Today, I'm excited to speak with our guests as we delve into the area of mental performance. After 17 years as a competitive gymnast, including 4 at the Division I level, our guest now channels her love of competition into helping others deal with the mental aspect of sports performance. As a certified professional coach and owner of Beyond the Game, she offers life and mental performance coaching for athletes. Let's give a warm Network Nation welcome to our guest today, Amanda Clements. Amanda, welcome to Network Nation today.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
So one thing I always start off with, I do a backstory, but yours, I'm just a little bit interested in. What led you down the path of mental performance? Why mental performance for you? I know I was looking at your background as a gymnast, but what was you had a BS, but what was your major in college?
So my major was actually criminal justice,
Okay.
and I thought my entire life I would be a spy. That was the plan.
Okay.
And it wasn't until, I had a 20-year competitive career in sports. And after college, I had a standard 9 to 5 job. I was working in an office in DC. And at the time, for me, being in my young 20s and making money and, commuting into the city, I was kind of happy every day. I really enjoyed it. And seeing kind of everyone around you that's miserable on Mondays and talks about how the weekend is too short and they don't enjoy their jobs, I kind of just had this thought of, if I could find a job that really helped people figure out what made them happy, that would be my job. I would help people find out what they wanted and go after it. And so that led me into life coaching. And then life coaching led me into, let me work with athletes who are transitioning out of sports and want to figure out what's next. And as I started to pursue that, it really just molded and shifted and changed and became this mental performance thing where I was mostly getting calls about performance anxiety and confidence and getting over mistakes and team culture. And I just kind of let it carry me. And now it's just something I never thought it would be, but I love it.
That's awesome. And then you have Beyond the Game as your company, right? What was the big breaking point for that where you said, wow, this is it. This is our next step. I'm here. I'm doing what I love to do. When was that point?
I don't know if it was a solid point because
right.
it wasn't exactly what I planned, but it was really just one day I kind of stopped and really assessed what I was doing and just realized, my God, like all the pressure that college kids put on themselves to find the right major and plan the right career path and know what they're doing right when they graduate, and looking back and realizing what I'm doing is not even close to anything I thought I would.
Right.
But I realized I really did, I was able to kind of shed that thinking trap of, I need to have a plan and this is what I'm going to do and this is what people expect of me. And I really dove into, oh, this is kind of cool. Let me try that. Oh, this sounds neat. Let me try that. And then someone would call and say, hey, have you worked with hockey players before? No, I haven't, but let me try that. And I really started exploring and trying and realizing one day, man, I'm like really doing something I love. It was just kind of this, all of a sudden I noticed it, but it was happening for a while.
We just had guests on the show, a number of guests, but one thing is dealing with athletes beyond sports and, looking at the college level. The reason I asked you this question for our younger audience is that I think it needs to be seeds planted early with looking at researching, experimenting, exposure. And you just nailed it on the head. How many college students, even when I came out of school, I'm still in business, but I went into the health field and physical therapy. And now I'm doing what I love to do, right? And you ask yourself, can you really identify who you are at 21 years old? No, not mostly you're not, right? I'm not who I was when I was 21. So I'm glad you pointed it out. And I want to reiterate that to a lot of parents and young athletes out there, is that just because you don't know, and some of you college students, that's okay. If you're noticing some of the people in life, it takes a while to figure that out. Now I want to know this though, along that journey, what about mentors? Did you have any mentors along the way that really said, let you know, to say this, wow, this, I never thought of it that way. This is the path that I want.
It It wasn't necessarily a specific person that at the time I knew this was my mentor. Um, but it really was having people around me, and that included my immediate family, my closest friends, people I worked with, who, when I would present an idea, like, what do you think about this? I think I'm going to be a life coach. Oh, I think I'm going to try this. What about this? And people that really said, go for it, try
Mm,
it, see what happens. If I didn't have that, I would have never moved forward. If anyone had kind of planted the seed, probably shouldn't do that. That's not really a safe path. Oh, but you have benefits now. Don't give up your benefits
yeah,
to
that's
try
that's
this.
usually what hold people.
If I had anyone planting the seeds at that age, I would have listened to it and I would have said, "Oh, you're probably right. Let me like stay this safe route and keep my benefits and my salary." But I didn't. I had people that were all about it. I had people that knew, like, yeah, this might not work. This might take a lot of time,
Hmm.
a lot of effort. It might not be easy, but go for it and we're here for you. And so it wasn't necessarily a mentor, but it was really being surrounded by support.
Almost that tribe. You had a tribe, a group around you. That's what it is. And it's not
Exactly.
anything that we start. It's just like growing a tree. It won't grow with fruit overnight. So it takes love and care to grow it. But I'm going to go into this here. A lot of people, we hear the term mental performance. What is, so for some young parents and coaches, what is mental performance so they understand what it is?
Excellent question. And it really is, in my opinion, in the way I teach it and present it, it's one, understanding what thoughts are, what mindset is, where they come from, understanding that a large portion of thoughts and thinking is automatic and that they're
Hmm.
not necessarily the first things that come to your head are not necessarily what you believe or what you want to say. It's just a portion of the brain that is meant to create automatic thoughts for you. And mental performance is learning those concepts and then being able to realize, this is what I want to think, this is how I want to think, this is what I want to say. And when I do this, I have certain emotional responses. And when I recognize my emotional response, I can choose my behavior, my performance. It really comes down to thoughts, feelings, and actions, understanding how they work, and then starting to gain slightly more control over them so that in situations like games or tournaments or being scouted, when we have automatic reactions of fear and worry and anxiety, we can add a level of control over that.
Let me ask you this, because when we talk about, especially with high school students, where they're looking at that next level to play a sport, I can see a lot of parents, they're looking for any kind of training or development that can help them get to that next level, give them, as we all hear, the edge. But what about if I'm hearing parents out there that are at the younger level? They're at junior high. I just was a group of junior high athletes yesterday, and the parents would say, "Okay, I'm hearing you that in high school, but why would I? My child is 13, 12 years old. Why would I start at this point? When is a good point to start as far as mental development and performance with a child?"
That's an excellent question. If it were up to me, I would actually start it in elementary school in our school curriculum. I would
Right.
want these things to be taught throughout school, but since they're not,
Hmm.
I introduce it through sports. And there isn't necessarily a great age to start it, but one, for what I see anyway with athletes, and this is my experience as well, when they first enter their sport,
Hmm.
typically in an elementary school age, often they enter it because it's fun and exciting and they can run around. And for me as a gymnast, it was about flipping and climbing and tumbling and jumping. And it's just fun. You do it because it's fun.
Hmm.
And when athletes start to advance and they start to enter competitions or games or tournaments, um, and they start to see the outcomes of what happens when you win and what happens when you lose. And in particular, if you have, coaches that don't have a deep understanding of this, and you get in trouble if you lose, or you have extra conditioning if you lose, or you get benched if you make a mistake. And I'm not saying all coaches are like that, but things like this can certainly plant the seed to, well, now I'm afraid to go out there. I'm afraid to try this. Well, I don't want to mess up because I'll be benched. And fears start creeping in. And at any point that that starts, whether it's fifth grade, seventh grade, high school, is an excellent time to introduce it. But, even just prior to that, having athletes notice emotions. I'm having a lot of fun today. Oh, there's a game coming. I'm feeling scared. What does that feel like? Does it change my performance? Just having that language around and being aware of it, I think can be started at any age and at any point in their sport.
What you talked about is really good because we always hear about with athletes, you have positive reinforcement. And I think too, at a younger age, I think a lot of coaches, I won't say all coaches, but it should be something that's brought into their developmental window as far as professional development. Because out of a lot of people I've had on the show, and just when you're working with youth, I think the biggest thing, and we'll get at this a little bit here, is let's talk about mental toughness. But before we do, is it's they're a sponge that absorbs information. And if that energy you're giving off is negative, or if it's overly competitive, and understand. And one thing I've done with a group of young athletes earlier this week is send out a survey. Now they're between ages of 12 and 14, but I wanted to know what they wanted to do. And this is in track and field of sport. And it was 30 young men. And so what I wanted to know is I need to know why they're here. And that's how you approach them differently. And I found out whether they're recreational activities, what do they do outside of school. And if we start to learn who they are, we don't all approach them with the same method because we're all different, right? Some of us are extroverts, some are introverts, some are lacking confidence in belief system. And I think that's important because it carries over into life and business or whatever we do. Because if I lack it when I'm young, it's going to carry over if we don't develop that. So I want to go into this as it pertains to that. We start talking about, we hear this a lot. And I know I've heard it, well, what my child needs to get. And if anyone Googles this with youth, it'll come up millions, if not billions. How can I get my child mentally tougher? That mental toughness. What do we do to get our child tougher? What would you recommend there? Because when you hear tough, I think of, I'm showing my age, there used to be tough skin jeans back in when I was a little kid in the 70s, and they were these rough, ragged jeans that could take anything. I don't know if I want you to be like Rambo to that degree. So some parents say, because they hear that, it's like, that's kind of abrasive. I don't want my child like tough, like Bully or Cobra Kai, the fights they have on the new Karate Kid. I don't know if I want my kids like that. What would you, so we can kind of soften that level of toughness and explain it a little bit better?
Yeah, and I'm so glad you brought that up because I talk about that all the time is mental toughness. The concepts of it are really good, but you're right, that word tough has a certain connotation and people often think it means, okay, if I want to be mentally tough, there's like a layer of being angry or a layer of
That's it. Yeah.
being tough and rough, and that's not what it is. And mental toughness for me is really, again, going back to understanding in this moment, what am I thinking? What am I feeling as a result? How am I performing? And the toughness is really mental understanding. Okay, if this is what's happening now, what do I want to do? How do I want to shift? This is what's happening mentally, but I'm going to change this. This is what's happening emotionally. I'm going to get that emotion out and shift it. And this is what's happening performance-wise as a result, which is not what I want. So I'm going to shift that. Mental toughness is really stopping and recognizing what's happening and making a change. And it's human behavior, just human behavior to avoid anything that feels bad or uncomfortable. And mental toughness is letting yourself feel, this doesn't feel good, this feels uncomfortable, I feel kind of scared and anxious. I'm noticing it, I can get it out, and I can shift it.
Those are good points there. And that leads me into this here, because if we're talking about that, and we were talking about an age to start, right? The younger, the better. I totally agree. I think that'd be a great curriculum to write, everyone. Actually, that's interesting there. But let's look at it this way. If we looked at top 5 key mental skills to develop, what would those skills be? What would you recommend? So that if anyone listening, these are some top skills that you can work on at home or as a coach with youth. What would you recommend?
Emotional intelligence, which
Mhm.
is, for me anyway, labeling the emotion you're feeling, being able to communicate, I feel scared right now. And when I feel scared, I have butterflies or I sweat or my muscles get tense. noticing it, labeling it, and understanding the physical response to it.
Mm-hmm.
That, I can't tell you how many times when I work with athletes, their homework is literally day to day, label the emotion and notice how you feel physically in response to it. There's no other homework but to notice it and label it. And again, that increases that awareness of what is really happening at any moment.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then next, self-talk, of course, and not just, okay, self-talk is self-talk, but noticing what thoughts come automatically, realizing that those aren't truth, those aren't reality, that's just the brain creating a thought for you.
Mm-hmm.
And you can then pause, notice it. You can choose something else if you want. You can say anything to yourself if you want. And finally, what positive self-talk actually is. I think there's this big misunderstanding of what it is. And positive self-talk is really anything, or positive thinking is anything that triggers a positive emotion.
Mm-hmm.
And I have athletes all the time saying, well, I'm not just going to go out there and say, oh, I'm the greatest. I'm like, well, if that makes you feel anxious, then that's not a positive self-talk. It's not a positive thought. But if you go out there and say, I'm a really good teammate, or I'm going to work really hard, or I'm going to execute my plays as best as I can, and that makes you feel calm or it makes you feel confident, that's positive self-talk and that's positive thinking. And so just making sure people understand what positive thinking really is, which is anything that triggers a positive emotion, and that's going to be different for everybody.
Mm. It's if you looked at it too, so parents understand this, how much of it is mental, how much of it is physical, because you see a lot of now, a lot of club sports, a lot of training, a lot of development going on. I have some guests on before that we were talking about that off the screen, off the show, is how much money I've seen it directly where there's so much put into the physical. But this is what I think people realize is that you can be genetically gifted, but if I can get in your head, I can destroy you. And that matters on what you and it's not just in sports, but it's in life. You could be getting ready to present on a stage, and our business is based on that. And I can say a couple of things to you before you go on stage, and just your mind is shifting. And now you can't focus. Where you can see that. What can parents, looking at that, what would you, as if you gave that a percentage, how much of it is mental, how much of it is physical, based on your experience with working with athletes?
So when I ask coaches what percentage of their sport is mental, I've never heard less than 60%, but I typically hear in the 90% range. In
Okay.
my professional opinion, everything we do, sports or otherwise, every action we take, everything we say, every performance we have is based on our mental state.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, everything we do has a mental component to it. It's just in certain situations, high pressure situations, the mental piece gets triggered a little more because there's often a lot of fear and anxiety associated with performance and outcomes that we want to achieve. And if we're not sure we're going to achieve that outcome, the mental side ramps up with the fear and the worries. And so if you don't have any mental training whatsoever or any mental understanding, or it never gets addressed by coaches or parents or anything like that, in high pressure situations where you're unsure of the outcome, or there's an outcome you want and you're worried you're not going to get it, you're going to want some mental training to understand what's happening and how to deal with it. So in my opinion, mental is 100%. It's always there.
Yeah, I agree with you, because I was thinking about it as you were talking. I never really gave it a number, but it was high. But here's the thing: we hear about it, but we really don't see it applied, do we? When I look back, we hear, yeah, it's 70, it's 80%. Well, what are you doing to, you're doing all these physical attributes as far as developing, but you're not dealing with the mental. It's like, well, my car needs an oil change, and I know it needs this many miles. You've gone 100,000 miles. The oil is not oil anymore. So but you're tearing the engine up, right? And so I wanted to go over this because I know with everyone with me, okay, on staying on schedule with our time, is that a huge thing, and you know this. I've dealt with this before. I could look in the eyes of the young men when I first met them and building that relationship and bringing this out. But I know there's some parents that want to know this too, is confidence. How can we bring that confidence out? If I'm two things I want to ask as a parent and as a coach, if you're dealing with a team, because and the younger is because there's an authority figure there that's standing, and how do I reach them with different personalities? What would you recommend to parents to bring out more confidence? Just something, one key there for a parent or coach. What would you recommend for a coach with a team or a child and their parents?
My recommendation is going to be the same for both, and it's
Okay.
really making sure your athlete knows what they can control, and the outcome is something that we can certainly influence, but we truly do not have control over. We can't control the opponent and how well they do. We can't control officials and what mistakes they may or may not make, what calls they may or may not make. We can't control the weather, and the weather, if you're playing an outdoor sport, can have a huge effect on the outcome of a game or a tournament. And so, but we teach athletes that the outcome is what's most important, but you can't control the outcome, but it is most important. And that's where the fear and the anxiety comes from. So if we can get each athlete to understand, you can control your effort, you can control what kind of teammate you are, and if you're cheering, you can control how coachable you are. If your coach is giving you feedback, you can control your eye contact, and if you're actually listening, and if you execute. If you teach them all the things they can control and let them know that these things you can control are the most important part of the game, then suddenly, instead of, oh my God, I hope we win, what if we don't, it becomes, oh, my effort is most important. Oh, I can control it. Then that's where confidence comes from. You have a direct impact on something that's important. And if we can shift that mindset away from focusing on what's going to happen at the end of the 60 minutes or whatever it is, to right now, this is your job and you can control it, that's where confidence really comes from.
And that's where it comes in the earlier form of development with it versus waiting late, because everyone thinks that they can cram this in overnight. It can take years. And so as they evolve and adapt to different environments, just like we do as adults, it's better to start off early building that, because confidence is everything. If I lack it, and then how does that apply when we start talking about focus with a team? What would you recommend is confidence, but with focus? Because I can be confidence, but I lack focus. If I was a coach and I was looking at this, something I can do to get them more focused as a team. You were standing there talking in front of my team right now. What would you say to, hey, I get you got 2 minutes to tell my team something to focus on?
And that, again, with each athlete, going back to each athlete is
It's gonna
different.
be different, right?
Sometimes for one person, they excel when their focus is so minute and so specific. And when they look at that, they excel. Some people, when they focus internally, I focus on feeling calm and just feeling my feet on the ground. Some people just excel when they're focused inwardly versus outwardly. Some people wildly focus when they look at the crowd and see their family, and suddenly it's like, this is a game time situation, and they just run with it. And so again, teaching the ideas of wide focus, specific focus, external focus, internal focus, and letting athletes play with it, incorporating it at practice. Okay, I want you to focus on just looking at the entire field and seeing how you do. And for some people, they're like, man, this really works. For other people, it's okay, now I want you to practice focusing on just the ball. And for some people, it's like, wow, this really works for me. So incorporating it as a skill that's meant to be tried and explored and worked on and practiced. And that way, come game time, tournament time, whatever it is, each athlete knows what type of focus works for them, and then they can execute.
And then I know we had an episode, his name is Dr. Ivan Joseph, that he done at TED Talks. I don't know if you heard that, where he talks about skill with repetition over and over and over again. And you really brought up a good point with that everyone's listening with focus is that everyone's different. I've done an episode looking at 2 different athletes. I believe one was Michael Jordan and it might have been Ray Lewis, where Michael was more, he fed off internally. He wasn't a showboater talking. He talked trash, but you never saw it. Ray Lewis had a ritual everyone knew. But if I'm a coach and I have these athletes and I'm approaching you the same way, then if I have a Michael there, well, I'm looking at him saying he doesn't know what he's doing. He's not good at this sport. And I'm looking at Ray Lewis that's feeding off of what I'm doing. That's why it's so important coaches know the difference. I had to do it yesterday. We looked at an audio. Some kids are more audio and more visual. And so you have to bring both and always get feedback. And I asked them about something I gave an example of, and they appreciate it, to get feedback from them and find out what it is. And here we're at 12 to 14 years old. And these are important things. And I know we're getting near the end of that show that we're transitioning. We call motivational moment. It sounds like you know what it is, right? Similar to the NFL's 2-minute warning, let us know we're near the end of the show. Imagine you're a keynote speaker speaking to parents, coaches, and athletes. If you could give one message to motivate, educate, inspire the audience, what would it be? Congratulations, you're at the mic ready to present. Again, congratulations and good luck.
Thank you. What I really want people to know is, even though we have rules and thoughts of what we believe, this is how sports work, this is the type of athlete you have to be, this is how you have to perform, I want people to feel freedom to explore and try and figure out what lines up with them, what their values are as an athlete, who they want to be, how they want to be, and really learn to express that, and start to shed the fears of, okay, an athlete is supposed to look like this, and an athlete is supposed to act like this and do this. But really finding out, what do you like? And this goes for coaches and parents as well. Who do you want to be? How do you want to connect with others? How do you want to leave your team? How do you want to help your team or in individual sports? How do you want to perform? And really connecting to that and following through with that, and not shying away from being someone that you feel like might be slightly different from what the version should be.
Well, that's a great motivational moment. So how can our guests reach you, and what platforms can they connect with you on?
So in line with what we just talked about,
Right.
I have shied away from the entrepreneurs should have social media and should do this and should do
Right.
that. But I can be contacted on my website, which is btgcoach.com, and that's BTG for Beyond the Game. And my cell phone is on there, my email is on there. Anyone can contact me at any time with questions or wanting to reach out.
Well, awesome. Thanks again for coming to Network Nation today, man.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been fun.